Welcome to Season 2 of The Strain Podcast, a Southgate Media Group production, where we talk all about Guillermo del Toro's horror fantasy series The Strain, which started its second season on FX. I'm your host, Blair Knight Graves, Director of Social Media and Associate Editor from TVBinges.com, and with me today is Kyle Tremblay, the Editor-in-Chief at TVBinges.com. You can find us on Twitter at BlairLovesTV and at KyleLovesTV. Remember, both Kyle and Blair have an E at the end. You can also follow this podcast Twitter handle at @TheStrainPod. Hi, Kyle. How you doing today?
Oh, Blair, excuse me for 1 second while I knock over all of our very important and expensive lab equipment. I'll be back to you in a minute.
Oh, great. And I'll come and yell at you and force your face into a vampire stinger.
Yeah, that seems about right. That seems like a thing that two likable characters would do, right?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair.
Just a real heartwarming father-son moment of bonding.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's always needed in the apocalypse to make sure that we understand how much they love each other.
I mean, if there's one thing that apocalyptic stories have an opportunity to do, it's to reinforce the bonds between us and our loved ones. And nothing says that like the character of Zach. There's nothing that makes me think, boy, I wish I had a son, than seeing Zach on TV.
Seeing him hop onto a bus and just give stink face all over the place.
The moment he got on that bus, I was cheering like the U.S. just won a gold at the Olympics. Like I was like, he's gone! And then freaking F pulls him away at the last minute like the anti-hero he is. That was really... Has there ever been a less likable F moment than refusing to spare us for more Zach scenes? Just let him go, F. Let the bird fly away.
I'm going to venture to say that last week's F was worse for me.
That was a rhetorical question because pinpointing the least likable that F has ever been is kind of like dividing by 0 in that it can't be done. So here we go.
Science.
Math, but I guess that's science adjacent.
All right. Well, we got a little ahead of ourselves, but today we're going to be discussing Season 2, Episode 3, which was titled Fort Defiance. This episode was written by Regina Corrado, who is also known for her writing on Deadwood, John from Cincinnati, and Sons of Anarchy. Previously, she has written 2 other episodes of The Strain. She wrote The Disappeared and It's Not for Everyone, which, if I recall, are 2 episodes that you and I were not terribly fond of.
Yep.
So I'm gonna guess that it's in line with how we feel about her writing in the past.
Blair, we've gone 3 for 3. It's a nice day in baseball, not a great day when you're talking about episodes that we did not like of The Strain.
Yes. Yes. This episode of Fort Defiance I would say this is dialogue, at least in the way that the dialogue was written. Mm-hmm. At the very basis, this was the worst dialogue this Season 2 has had so far.
I mean, that's bold.
But it had a lot of cool practical special effects and a lot of really cool action sequences. So I'm sort of in this middle ground of trying to figure out how I feel about it because it's so visually exciting, but so painful for my soul.
Yeah, it wasn't comically bad like last week. At least, I mean, I should say there were moments that were comically bad, but that's kind of par for the course with The Strain. There weren't like giant chunks of this episode. Although now that I think about the Fett and Dutch adventures in this episode, maybe I need to eat my words and take that back immediately. But I did think that this episode was more competent in general than last week's.
Yes.
It got through stuff okay. There were a lot of attempts at character moments in this episode, which is what I think you're talking about with the dialogue, where there was definitely a concerted effort here to let us get to know characters, whether it was Dutch, whether it was Nora, whether it was Abe. You know, they were really making an effort to shed some light on these characters that have previously just kind of been plot conduits, and I would say it was met with what I would generously call mixed success. That might be a little too generous, but I appreciated the effort. You're right, there was action in this episode, and there were a couple of wacky plot points, but overall, it was not a disaster. Still not what I would call good. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of where I fall.
No, I would definitely say that, and I don't ever want to discourage the strain from working at those character moments because I think that they're meaningful and necessary. I just don't think. I just, I don't understand. We've talked about this a lot before, but I'm starting to see patterns with some of these writers where they just don't seem competent of writing dialogue of
Mm-hmm.
people in the modern era, which is interesting because they're not old people. The people who are writing The Strain, they are
Right.
people in their 30s and 40s. They're not out of. You would think that those would not be people who are out of touch, but there were some things in this episode specifically. They were trying to portray racism. He said, "Your brother or your brother." When talking to a black man, asking him like, "What do you mean by brother?"
Hold on, I
Which
did
was
comment on that. My comment is oof. Okay, go on.
yes,
Go on.
oof. And then there was Dutch's ex-girlfriend's mother saying, "I don't agree with your lifestyle, and it's not the gays." And again, just sort of
No.
not these aren't ways that people actually speak, and there are certainly many other instances in this episode
Oh yeah.
where that was the case. I think Dutch and Fett had a lot of very strange dialogue between the two of them. They still
Oh, yeah.
maintained chemistry, but that they had weird lines that didn't exactly make sense. And it felt odd sometimes listening to the words coming out of the characters' mouths because it just doesn't feel like the way people actually speak to one another. And maybe that's me living in a liberal city around mostly young people, but it seemed really off to me in a lot of ways.
No, I mean, obviously you're right. And I mean, first of all, if there's ever been a show that's really equipped to dig its heels in and comment on the homophobia and racism that's present in society, it's definitely this dumb vampire show. I mean, when I think hard-hitting social commentary, the first thought, FX Sunday nights at 10. That's what I'm looking for. No, I mean, obviously, like, anytime the strain is going to, like, wade its toes into the big kids pool, it's immediately going to get swept up in a riptide and pulled under and drown. This is not a show that has any business making any kind of commentary on social issues. And in this episode, to be fair, it was really only a couple like throwaway lines of dialogue, like the two
Right.
you quoted. It wasn't like we had like a very special episode of the strain, which would be a complete disaster. But yeah. And I will point out, I know you like the books, and I liked book one overall, but this is a problem in the books. The Gus character is where this problem comes out, which is who is a fast-talking, street-smart Latino here to educate the old white people about what's what on the streets. Is how I imagine the character was written in like the brief, but that Gus's character in the books is comically poorly written. Like,
well, let's just also just say again for audiences, you've only read book one.
Yes, right. So, I'm not talking about like his plot or anything like that. I'm saying his dialogue in book one is comically bad. It resembles a white person in their 50s doing an impression of what they think a gang member talks like. Like that's the character in book one. And I'm not saying he's a bad character or anything. I'm just saying his dialogue in that book is that. And that is carried over to the TV show and infected a variety of other characters, much like the vampire virus itself. Because anytime any young person says anything that a young person might say, they say it in a way in which a young person would never say it.
Well, it's not exclusive to young people. So I don't know how you feel about this, but the Dutch's ex-girlfriend, Nikki, I think Nikki's mother, talks to Nikki in a way that, first of all, I could not understand what she was accusing Dutch of, and second of all, like she said, and it's not the gays stuff, not the gay stuff or the lesbian stuff, it's the gays stuff, which is just a phrase that is so awkward.
I thought he said the gay stuff, but maybe I just heard it the way that it should have been said. I mean, not that should be said, but if you're going to say it, that's the way you say it.
Well, I was in a group of 3 people, and all of us heard the gays stuff. Like, we all made a comment about it. We all thought it was very, like, an odd line of dialogue. I would venture to say that the conversation between Palmer and Coco Marchand was also very, very strange. His new assistant woman who just exists because they need a female to exist. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like it just like sentences that aren't constructed in great ways. But I don't want to harp on that too much. This was an episode that was like above and beyond the usual bad writing, in my opinion.
Well, I think the show is always written to some varying degree of what we saw tonight, but the problem is this episode was a sort of character building episode,
Right.
and so we got more writing, and like that scene, the Dutch scene where did we really need to check in with the mother of her ex-girlfriend? Like, is that a character that we've just been dying to hear from? Who's been posting wanted posters around the city? Like, is that who we're spending 15 minutes of this episode with? Like,
Right.
I don't know. It's just like this contrivance, obviously, to get to I guess try to flesh out Dutch a bit, which is a noble goal and something that needs to happen. But I still don't think I understand anything about her. Like, did we actually learn anything about her as a character as opposed to just her circumstances?
Yes.
We did learn something.
Yeah, well, that she has self-hatred,
Yeah.
and she believes that she is innately a bad person, not innately a good person. And with that self-hatred, with that innate badness, comes this bad girl sexuality where she feels like she can kind of run off and do whatever she wants with whomever she wants and manipulate them with her sexuality. That I think is, they were driving that home as much as possible, because previously we saw her as a very flirtatious character, but only in the last 2 episodes have we seen her as a sexual character. So this is sort of their explanation. I think this is the writer's explanation for why Dutch is behaving the way that she is behaving with Fett.
That makes sense. That I will accept your explanation. And did not get that because the ridiculous of one episode after a vampire pool hot tub tryst, they end up having the same thing. Well, not the same thing, if we want to get into the specifics, but something similar in a van outside the mother of her ex-girlfriend's house.
Yes. Yes.
So we're on some kind of like Grateful Dead style touring the country, having sex tour with these two right now. Is that what we're doing? Is that their story? It's
the sex ventures of Fett and Dutch.
So we've got this like kind of campy, cheesy vampire story happening, and then the B story is basically like a midnight Cinemax movie between Dutch and Fett. These are our stories this season.
I will say that the Dutch and Fett thing did lead to a really fun. First, I think it led to interesting performances on the part. An interesting performance on the part of Dutch. Again, I cannot remember that actress's name. And then a very good performance for Kevin Durand while he's trying to figure out how to help her through this confusion. Mm-hmm. But my favorite thing that happened, which was very subtle, and I only just saw it when they were replaying it again when I was writing up my notes, was that Fett feeds her a couple of crackers right before they go to find Zach on the bus. And F is walking around looking at books or something, and he says, "Is this foreplay for you?" And it's just really cute and funny, and it's like, oh, look, they all have chemistry together. They can all have a conversation together without it being dire. Like, let us have more of that. If you want this campy show, like don't just nestle that into one little line right before you all freak out to go find Zach. Like, make that be like let there be a scene where they're all kind of funny and hilarious with each other. Don't let it just be something that you kind of dust under the rug.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on, because there's never these moments where everyone's just sitting around shooting the breeze. You know, no one's ever. There's no like. Because we get these moments of levity that we often make fun of. You know, with the Dutch and Fett trysts being the most recent, but. Yeah, for this to be a campy show, which it should definitely be trying to be at this point, although it's completely unclear if it's intentionally that way or not, but it should have moments where everyone's back at the base talking with one another in like a big group scene, like almost like a friend scene or something, where like everyone's in the same room and they're just sort of volleying back and forth. That kind of scene does not exist on the Strain at all. What the Strain does is it breaks the members of the team into pairs, and then it gives those pairs stuff to do. But we never actually see everyone talking as a group, and that's a weird. It's a weird hole to have, because you would think that that's the way you would make everyone likable, in that you would like it would directly address the problem of the show, which is that I don't want to hang out with any of these people. Like that's the real issue here, is that we're spinning the apocalypse with the world's least interesting crew.
Right.
And they don't seem especially competent, and they don't seem especially moral or trustworthy or interesting. And so we've got this, what is currently, I guess, a New York-wide event, but will surely become a worldwide event. But we're saddled with this group of people who, aside from just the convenience of the story, I don't see any real reason that we're following them. I'm sure that'll become clear as the story intertwines, but it just doesn't. It just is not an interesting entry point into this story as of now.
Yeah. There's little bits that I agree that I would like more, and I would like the characters better. Like there was that when F is trying to like teach his son something as a father, and he can't figure out where he's going with this conversation, and he walks off, and he has that really funny moment with Nora where he's like, I have no idea where I was going with that. And that was very clever. That was very cute. And that's more of the monster fighting that I would like to see. I think you're right there, because I was thinking earlier about making a comparison to Buffy a little bit, with Gus, and he's training with the vampires. He's got the training scene. And Vaughn, not Quinlan, I apologize. Last week I was calling him Quinlan. In the books he's called Quinlan. There's some kind of...
It still might not be clear who he is.
Yeah. There's some very strange activity on Twitter. A lot of people were sending me some articles. I appreciate that, everybody. But it appears to be the case that they may or may not have switched the name of that character, and Quinlan may or may not be coming back. So in any event, Gus is training with a vampire. And, he's teaching him how to do stuff, and he's got this kind of comical back and forth with the vampire, which is very Buffy the Vampire-esque, or even like Spider-Man-esque from the original Tobey Maguire movies, even with the Andrew Garfield movies, where he's kind of being clever and quippy while he's learning how to do what he's doing. And I find that to be really enjoyable when they have scenes like that, when they have the things like F saying, oh, this is your foreplay, or F saying, I have no idea what I'm doing with my kid, or Gus like quipping with the vampires while he's trying to learn how to kill them. And that's fun. That allows me to get to know the characters. But Dutch having a panic attack and like starting to scream in a van, and Satrakian pouring his concoction into his eyes to make himself younger, and Zach just kind of having the worst face that a child can have, just like stink face all around. It's like, that's not like, or say, I just want to go see my mom. Like none of that makes, as you were saying, like it doesn't make me like these characters or want to follow them, or like they can be bad people, they can do bad things, but they have to have some redeeming qualities, even if that's just them being quippy, Right.
No, that's exactly it. And see, with those Gus scenes where he's what I can only describe as trash talking the vampires, I just found that lame, and maybe that's because, well, actually I know why that is. First of all, because the dialogue itself was lame, which is just a running problem, but also because the context of the show is that the Strain isn't that show, right? Like it's not Buffy. If it was Buffy, that kind of stuff is great. And if it was like the I've only seen like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, but if it was that tone, that sort of light tone, that's great. And it's like I like that in theory, and I very much wish the Strain committed to being that show, but it doesn't. Right? It's the kind of show where F has the funniest line of the episode, which you already quoted, where he closes the door on Zach and says, "I don't know what I was talking about," which is great. Like a real like moment of like, oh yeah, he's sort of making this up as he goes along. Like he's not the character that knows everything or never makes a mistake. And then 2 seconds later, Zach is destroying everything in the lab, and we're reminded that, oh, this is a very serious story because F needs to teach his son about all this, and his son is not coming to terms with the mother, and but it's like couldn't that have just been a fun moment? Like, F closes the door, says that line, and then the scene ends. Like, how good would that have been? Like, that's the version of The Strain I want, where you end on the joke and then you go to the next scene. Like, we don't need the heavy, which is like a 9-year-old kid bringing everyone down at the end of every scene. Like,
Right.
it just, I don't know. Like, The Strain, I get the sense it's a show that's very afraid of having fun.
Yeah.
This is not a show that, I should say, this is a show that takes itself too seriously to have fun with its premise. Like any kind of consistent fun. You know, we have these moments where Fett is doing silly things, like he likes saying "boom" a lot. I guess that's his thing.
I love that so much.
I don't know what that is, but okay,
Yeah.
that's a kind of weird character quirk that I can get by with. But then, of course, we have the very serious stuff and all this serious mythology and Zach being upset and this story about parenthood and what it means to protect your child and like all this stuff that is foregrounded, and all the humor stuff is kind of just injected in spurts. And I wish that a ratio would flip, and that we would foreground the humor, and the actual story would be occurring a little more in the background. Like that you recommended, I think it was you recommended a movie to me. It was like a I think Nathan Fillion was in it.
Oh, Slither.
Slither, yeah, that movie, like that movie, that kind of silly horror movie. That's kind of exactly what I wish The Strain was.
That's exactly what I wish it was too. For our listeners who don't know, Slither is an alien invasion film starring Nathan Fillion. It was directed by the same person who wrote. It was written and directed by the same person who wrote and directed Guardians of the Galaxy. So you can kind of identify that type of humor if you saw Guardians of the Galaxy.
James Gunn?
That is James Gunn. There you go.
Your knowledge.
You do. Look at you.
Yeah.
And Slither is a very, in many respects, a very scary film. It has Elizabeth Banks, and it also has who's from The Walking Dead.
I don't remember anything else other than Nathan Fillion.
Oh yeah, well, it's the guy who's also in Guardians of the Galaxy. But anyway, it's a very, very scary film, but it's also a very, very, very funny and campy film.
But that film is scary precisely because of how campy it is. Because this is what The Strain just fundamentally doesn't understand, which is that scary is all about context. It's all about the moments when it's not trying to scare you, where you can build up the tension, and then just when you relax, it actually tries to scare you. The Strain is like never modulates like that. It's always got this like really serious tone, and only has brief moments of levity. But there's never like an extended stretch where The Strain isn't very dire or very plot focused.
Right.
And it would be so much scarier if it was less like that, and then when it did try to scare you, it committed to it and it came out of the blue. Because these vampires are so not scary at all, right? Like they're just not scary at this point. Like we can all, like anyone who's watching the show, are you scared of the vampires? You can't be. You cannot possibly be scared of the vampires at this point. When like Abe is just walking around the streets casually at night and like beheads one just for fun.
Right.
You know, it's just they're not a scary force, and it's because they've been overused, and it's because they're just, the tone is never the same. Like they should be like surprise attack monsters, you know, like you're just we have like 20 minutes of just like nothing happening but like a sort of light tone, and then boom, the vampires show up and we have to like kick into high gear. That's something that The Walking Dead, a show that I've criticized for years and years and years, actually does fairly well at times, which is it sort of lulls you to sleep and then it hits you with something that's really scary. And The Strain like rarely even makes an attempt in that direction.
Yes. I think you and I probably differ in our view of the vampires in The Strain. I still find them very terrifying.
Are you really? Like you see the vampires and you're like, oh no, they might get the person.
I mean, the problem is that there haven't been any real stakes yet.
No one's died.
Nobody has died.
No one's died on the show. The
vampires... Well, Kelly did.
Okay.
That was terrifying when Kelly got turned. And you had to follow her through the process of being turned.
Yeah, right. No, I'm not saying the show hasn't had scary moments. I'm just saying it's not like, I don't know. I don't feel the lives of any of our main characters are in any kind of jeopardy. And I'm sure that will change eventually because someone has to die on the show. You can't just keep everyone alive forever on a show about the apocalypse. But I never, like, to me, there's absolutely no tension about characters living or dying.
This is probably one of those moments where the fact that I've read the books makes it so that I'm more scared of them. Because I did just re-listen to the last 5 chapters of, because I was listening to the audiobook, of book 2 to like sort of just get ready. And it's like, the it's so scary at the end of the book. They're so terrifying. There's so much stakes involved. But like that, you're right though, in the television show that's not translating.
Yeah, because book 1 is scary. I will say, but I read book 1 and that is a scary book.
Right.
It's just not, the TV show isn't scary. It's just not. I mean, I just don't. I don't look at this as a horror show now. I don't.
Right.
It just doesn't. The vampires are not scary. Like that's if you want to boil down everything into one thing, it's just I'm not scared of the vampires, and it's based on how they've told their story, and all of these character things we harp on. But I'm not scared of them, and that's a big problem.
What genre do you put it in right now? Anything?
Comedy.
But it's not. It's not.
Unintentional comedy.
Oh.
It's the 0-hour genre, I think, closest. I mean, it's
like the Dracula.
Yeah, I know it's not. I mean, yeah, I would say it's probably closer to Dracula than it is to a horror show right now. Like, because Dracula was also trying to be a horror show, but it's better than Dracula. It's definitely better than Dracula. I don't have any problem saying that. But it just doesn't. I don't know, like the Gus stuff, like that happens so fast. It's like Gus is recruited by this crew, and if there's one thing to know about me, and I know you know this, there's nothing I love more than heist movies. Like heist movies are my favorite thing in the whole world. And so this idea of Gus and this crew of like benign vampires, this vampire hit squad, infiltrating Palmer's building to kidnap Palmer, it's like that should be an A+ idea in my book. Like that's what I live for, right? That's exactly the kind of story I want. And it plays out in, I would say, 5 to 7 minutes of screen time. And we didn't even know about this plot last week. We go through this entire training montage of about 2 minutes of Gus trash-talking vampires, and then he has like one dialogue scene with Quinlan / whoever that guy is.
Vaughn or Quinlan, yeah.
And then the vampire crew skips into the building, literally skips, as I noted on Twitter, while Gus like gets them in the front door. And then they get trapped in a room. Palmer's onto him the whole time, and he fries them with UV rays. And then Gus apparently escapes, even though this is like the most highly secure building in the world. And Palmer is 100% aware of his presence. Gus just gets in an elevator and apparently escapes. It's like, that is the lamest heist I've ever seen.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
But shouldn't that have been an awesome, like, isn't that an awesome idea? Like, why wasn't this episode just Gus? Why wasn't this just a bottle episode of Gus training, of Gus talking to these people, of us getting to know, like, for starters, the character's name that we're dealing with, and then, like, us getting to know the hit squad. Why are they kidnapping Palmer? What's their motivations? What did they know about all of this? When did they find out? And then this whole, like Soderbergh type heist that goes on where they get into the building and they look really competent, and then at the last moment Palmer gets the best of them and he unveils the security system that he had installed. Like, why wasn't that this episode? Why was that the D story?
Right.
Like, that's my problem. It's like, this could have been great. Like, that's a great story, and they yada the whole thing.
I feel like, and I want to know how you feel about this, but I feel like, and this may not actually be that substantiated given the other content of the episode.
Yeah.
But Corey Stoll is like clearly blowing up right now. Like, he's becoming a movie star. He's been he's the big bad in Ant-Man. He was one of the leads in a dark comedy called This Is Where I Leave You with a bunch of other really big stars, and various other films. So, do you feel like some material being sacrificed to enable him to be on screen more because they know that they have him? That's a theory that I've sort of been running with a little bit lately. Yeah. Because there's a lot of good bottle stuff that we could be doing that we're not doing at all.
No, that's how this story should be told. Like, from a objective standpoint, if you take a look at what the Strain has on its chessboard right now, they should be telling these stories one by one, the way they did with what is still by far and away the best moment of the season to date, which is that bottle episode they did in season 1 about the convenience store.
Yeah.
That is still by far and away the show's only great, like, genuinely great moment.
Mhm.
And there's absolutely no reason that, like, 9 out of 13 episodes can't be that with these various characters, that we can't have a Fett episode, that we can't have a Gus episode, because they're these stories are so fragmented anyway. And as we were talking about, there's no sense of community at all within our group of quote unquote heroes, that you wouldn't be losing anything, right? There's no camaraderie to speak of. So breaking the stories up more dramatically wouldn't do anything to affect, like, the show in a negative way. It would only let us feel more connected to these stories and maybe give the show a bit more time to tell stories that feel like they matter and that are told in a compelling way. And so, but to answer your question, I think that's possible. I mean, like you said, we can't really substantiate it, but I know that that's something that happens where, a show has a very famous actor and they want to build everything around him, and they're scared to go away from him. In this case, Corey Stoll is a great actor. He's one of my favorites. He remains, his arc on House of Cards remains the only redeeming thing about that show. I don't think he's particularly good on The Strain.
I don't either.
Right? He's not. This is not the right character for him. The wig is not helping, and by the way, we will get to hashtag wig talk. Don't you worry. But this isn't like a Dynamite performance by any measure. And certainly, the character's not helping him, but I'm sure if he was given a good character, he would be doing a great job. He's not, and he's not elevating the character. And so,
it's
no reason.
I think part of it is that they are writing this character in so many different ways that there's no character for him to really pick to be. Yeah. Because, and I will say this, being informed by book 2 and watching what they're doing in season 2, like, F's alcoholism is supposed to be a major thing. Sure. And he's supposed to be pretty cruel to the people around him, for the betterment of humankind. And pretty cruel to bystanders as well as the people who he loves and the people who he's trying to save. But then they have these moments, and this is in the book. He's pretty straightforward, distraught the entire second book. Like, he doesn't have any of these funny moments that they're trying to interject, like these lines that I specifically just listed earlier, where he's like, "Is this foreplay for you guys?" And I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, those two instances where I really liked him don't fit with how the character should be. Where the character should be is the character I don't like, because he comes off as a bad guy, but the guy who ties down those people and forces them to be his experiment. Like, again, that didn't happen in the books, and I've sort of settled with it since last week that I actually think that fits more into his character than I initially react. Like, I didn't initially react very well to that. But that feels like something that I could buy for him, but that's if he remains that sort of consistent, cruel alcoholic, like, determined to save the world. I've lost everything except for my son, and I need to change the world to go back for my son. Like, but he's not. They're not writing him in a distinct single direction. They're giving him a lot of different stuff, and I think that's where he's struggling with his character, because I think Russo in House of Cards was also the alcoholic thing.
Yes.
But, like, a very different version of a television alcoholic, or a media, a movie alcoholic. And then This Is Where I Leave You, he's a character who is distraught over the loss of his father, and he's the only practical character, and so everybody else is sort of like wishy-washy, and he's practical and very straightforward. And I haven't seen Ant-Man yet. But, like, so any other time I've seen him, he's like, this is very much what your character is, and we don't go beyond the scope of that. And F is sort of supposed to be our witty hero, and he's also supposed to be this sort of terrible alcoholic. And where do you find, and also this brilliant scientist, where do you find the fine line between all of those different traits?
Right. No, that's exactly right. And if F's arc were that he is a mad scientist who was pushed over the edge by the loss of his wife and suddenly broke off from the group and became a sort of questionable force as to whether he's good or bad, and started doing really extreme experiments with Nora sort of in tow, but like warily, as kind of his voice of reason, but who he only like occasionally listens to, and he's getting really drunk, and he's yelling at his kid and pushing his kid's face into the vampire and all that. Like, were that the story that was being told, I could see that working. Or if F were the sort of fast-talking doctor who understands the severity of the apocalypse, but is putting on a brave face and heroic and trying to save people at all costs, I could see that as well. But we've landed in this middle ground where F is being, like, I feel like they're portraying F as unlikable on purpose, but they're also trying to maintain that he's the hero of the show. And it's just not, it leaves him in this weird place where I'm definitely not rooting for him.
Right.
But I'm also not having any fun rooting against him. In fact, I'm not really rooting against him. I'm in the place you don't want to be, which is I don't care about him.
Right.
You know, I should either, it should be one or the other. I should want F to succeed or I should want him to fail. But I feel utterly indifferent about all of this talk about the cure. Like, I at this point, given that still, like, no one is panicking, that there are still press conferences, no one except our favorite councilwoman is panicking.
Justine Feraldo, the hero of the strain.
Justine Feraldo for life. Can I sign up to vote for her?
The Queen of Staten Island.
Yes, thank goodness.
I will follow her into battle.
Absolutely. Someone is handling the apocalypse with the urgency that it requires. But, like, everyone was so shocked about, like, that display of stuff. It's like, yeah, man, this is war.
Yeah, your people are dying, their people need to die too.
People are dying, and citizens are putting up wanted posters for their loved ones. It's like, no, man, you can't go outside. People are dying. Why are there 400 people at this press conference?
I know.
Is TV happening? Because I saw TV cameras there. Is TV back on? If so, why isn't the citizenry panicking? Because they would know about this, right? There are vampire bodies being hung from the press conference rafters.
But there were 2 press conferences in last week's episode,
I know,
too.
there have been freaking press conferences happening for the whole series. I don't know. Like, it is. I mean, like, for the first, like, part of the first season, I remember us having conversations like, this is the moment in which everyone panics. And we've stopped because we've realized that there's not going to be such a moment. The panic is very gradual and moving at a snail's pace. Which,
Yeah.
I mean, if there's one thing that people are really, like, rational about, it's panic. Let's not panic quickly, because that's how the world works.
Yeah. No. That has been my biggest, like, struggle with it, especially having just, as I said, having just reread the second book. In the second book, you get this is not spoilers, but, like, you get the perspective from people around the world. You don't just get the perspective of our people in New York.
Right.
You get it from all over the place.
At this point, we have not left New York on the show.
No, we have not. And that's pretty concerning. That's actually, so I'm going to say this as lightly as I can, again, a book thing, but there are two perspective characters that are introduced in book 2 that I thought by the 3rd episode had to be introduced in order for them to exist at all in the show. So I'm starting to get really concerned about these new perspective characters not existing.
Yeah.
And it would make me really sad because they're really good characters.
Yeah. What will probably happen is they'll get introduced in one episode and then, like, killed off by the end of the episode. Like,
Yes.
that seems to be what they're doing, right? It's like these stories that are supposed to play out, like you were talking about with the feelers, how that was supposed to play out over, like, multiple chapters in the book. About 6 minutes of screen time and then we're good. Like, that's what the show does. It just sort of checks off these boxes without ever really, like, getting into what makes that plot point interesting or compelling. Right. It's just like, oh, well, this has to happen, so let's make it happen. And then let's get back to finding the cure and van sex. Things that we really care about this season.
Yes, very much. The one thing that I wanted to make note that I think there are a lot of things that are obviously very different from the books. That Dutch Velders doesn't exist. Sure. Justine Feraldo doesn't exist. Coco Marchand does not exist.
Not at all.
All the female speaking characters, yeah, they don't exist.
The blonde women of this world, yeah.
The blonde women of the world. But something that I thought was a very interesting detraction from the books was that Satrakian doesn't make this formula to like make himself youthful.
Really?
In the books. In the books, he's like this decrepit old man who is just getting worse and worse with every chapter.
Yeah.
Like in every chapter, he's like, man, it's hard to stand up today. Like he literally will have lines like that where he's just talking about how much of a struggle it is just to exist and go on, and how like and Fett and F need to help carry him sometimes because he's like so falling apart. And like I was trying to figure out, okay, logically, why is that? Well, the first book, The Strain, came out like 7 or 8 years ago, and it's something like all of the victims of the Holocaust are pretty much dead now. At least they're non-functioning nowadays if they're still around.
Sure.
But like people from that time period, like 2015 is actually pretty different from 2007, 2008.
Right.
So like that is a big time jump, and it's very difficult to justify a character being, walking upright and, being able to do things like a regular person.
When he said he was 94, I was like, what? What are you talking about?
But that's the point. They were saying like
yeah.
Because he took the blood.
I actually thought that made sense. And being not a book reader, I obviously don't have anything to compare it to. But that all checked out for me and actually explained a lot of why he's still like up and kicking. And it provided a nice little bit of parallel storytelling with what Palmer is doing, since he did the same thing to become youthful again.
Exactly.
So it's like these two like arch nemeses are actually engaging in these same methods of warfare.
Yes.
So.
But I actually really liked that scene with Satrakian and Nora where Nora finds because I did not by any means think that the actress was incompetent. I just didn't think that she didn't have any chemistry with anybody on the show. And it sometimes becomes a struggle when she's, has to deal with a lot of people in a personal way. But she did a really great job with, is David Bradley his name?
Yes.
They had really good chemistry. They were really nice on screen together. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's amazing what you get when you actually have two characters who don't usually spend time together talk with one another. And I do think they found something with Nora and Walder Frey, in that there was the kind of like almost grandfather relationship between them.
Right.
That they've been trying to force with Fett this season, with obviously grandson in that case, but that sort of fatherly relationship, I guess. It came much more naturally with Walder and Nora, and I think that's
Satrakian.
Yeah, Walder. Walder Satrakian. But you started this. This is your fault.
I know.
But yeah, it was. That was a nice scene. That was when I was saying at the start of this episode how it had mixed results, the character stuff. What I was referring to in the negative was the Fett and Dutch stuff. But the positive, the reason it was mixed, is that I did think the Nora and Satrakian stuff worked. Yes. And was nice. And again, just underscores the idea that maybe these characters should be in a room together more often. Not just those two. I mean, all of our characters in a room together having a conversation about stuff that maybe isn't directly plot related, although this was. But it'd be just nice to hear these characters talking with one another like human beings. That'd be super cool. Maybe make us like some of them a bit.
Yes. And then I guess the final character thing that I wanted to ask you about was about the character elaboration on Coco Marchand.
Oh, what a name!
I know. She has such a great name. About her... Are they trying to set it up for her and Palmer to be sleeping together? Because that would make me really uncomfortable.
Listen, the third season of True Detective could be devoted to figuring out what the purpose of this character is. Like, what... And not just, like... I'm sure that'll become revealed over time. But what the show thinks it's doing with her and Palmer. Like, what really, like, I need like a 30 for 30 documentary on what like an oral history on what the Strain thinks it's accomplishing with that character and Palmer. Like, is it trying to make Palmer more likable? I don't think so, because that seems like an incredibly stupid idea, and it's certainly not working. Is it does it think that we need Palmer to have like a romantic interest? And then like
Who's 80 years younger than him or
80 years
something?
younger than him, and as she notes in this episode, was a model in Europe for 5 years, because that's a key piece of information. But that line made me laugh out loud. I just don't. I don't know what the show thinks it's doing, but it's definitely not doing it. Whatever it is, it's not being done with that
Right.
character, because I do not get it.
I don't either. I'm highly confused, and I don't understand. There's no predictable direction, which sometimes is good in television, but it's not good in this case.
Not at all. This
No.
is a show, and it's not even like unpredictability that's the problem. It's that like in
Functionality.
functionality in the moment it doesn't make sense. Like I
Yeah.
don't even need to know where it's going. I just need that relationship to make any kind of sense as it's happening, and it does not.
I just feel like it was the network giving them the note that they needed another female speaking role.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. And they just love picking blonde women who are model hot. Like
Yeah.
that's really we couldn't like wouldn't that character just be more interesting if she was like not a former model?
Right.
Like, wouldn't just like having that character not look like that be interesting? I don't know. It's very strange to me, the decisions that this show makes.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't Dutch be more interesting if she was like kind of mousy? Like, because she's a hacker, right? She doesn't
Right.
need to be like a supermodel. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to discourage TV shows from hiring beautiful women, but are these the roles that like you should be like going to the hot blonde well to fill?
Right.
I don't know.
No, and I would agree with that with the Dutch thing. It's a very interesting casting choice to make her have that aesthetic, have that
Right.
very and I mean I understand that they're trying to make her an overtly sexual character.
But not until recently, as you pointed out.
Yes.
She was a flirty character. She wasn't really like wielding it like a weapon the way she kind of is now.
Right. And I just don't know. I don't understand the purpose of making the hacker that way.
Yeah. I would be much more charmed by her and Fett's romance if he was if she was kind of like Felicity and Arrow, who is a very beautiful actress, Emily Bett Rickards, but also like very mousy in terms of like the way that character is portrayed. Right, she has her hair back like in a tight ponytail with like glasses.
Right.
Like if that was the Dutch character, and Fett was kind of ostensibly out of her league, at least based on how the character was being presented, that romance would be so much more charming.
Yeah.
Then, Fett is like this super confident, self-assured dude who just landed like the hottest model in the world. It's like, great.
Right.
Like that, okay.
Like good for you guys.
Congratulations.
Right. No, yeah.
There's nothing to root for there.
Right. No, I agree. That's an interesting comparison. The Felicity character. I didn't finish Arrow, but that's a very interesting.
But that'd be a fun character, right? That'd be a cool character to exist in this world.
Right.
To have her be like smart and kind of sassy and maybe a little bit shy, but instead, like, I mean, I appreciate what you said, that they're trying to do something with her where she's actually self-loathing and sort of self-medicates that by sex.
Right.
Like that's okay. It's like I can get on board with that kind of, but I think it would be much more interesting the way that I pictured the character.
No, yeah. It's just interesting, like when you see this very clear idea that they need to be adding female speaking roles, and they only add one type of female speaking role, and it's just like there are many actresses out there in the world who could
just have a little creativity. Like,
right.
Like, do they all need to be European models? Like, is that all we're hiring now?
Right. Oh man. Okay, so are you ready for Wig Talk?
Hashtag Wig Talk.
Hashtag Wig Talk.
Yeah. First of all, I need to give some shout outs to the Wig Talk army growing every week. As the general of the Wig Talk army, I feel like it's important to now, as should become clear, I don't know anything about military ranks, so I apologize if I get this wrong, but I need to shout out the lieutenants of the Wig Talk army, which are our good friend on Twitter, Catherine. Very funny. She is at CATHE Menard. I don't know how you'd pronounce that. Kathy
Menard. Katha Menard.
Katha Menard.
Katha Menard.
I'm almost sure that's wrong, and I apologize to her. And Laura Lee, who's been great tweeting with, she is at Laura Lee _XX, and she tweeted during this episode and would like everyone to know that she is awesome. So there we go. Read it on the podcast. So anyway, this week I thought the best wig moment was when F was so Zach had had his temper tantrum at this point, and F went back into the room because apparently the in vogue thing to do this week is to trash talk the vampires. And so F, recognizing that the master is like hearing him through his talk with this drone vampire that he's captured, gives a very compelling speech about how he's gonna kill himself and his kid before he gets infected, yada yada. And the vampire this whole time is very well behaved and very calm, and I like to think the vampire was hypnotized by the power of F's wig. And maybe he was like the vampire's like, okay, this guy's giving a big speech, maybe I should like say something, like do something scary or be scary. But he's like, man, like, should I tell him about the wig? Like, should I let him know that it's not working for him, and like really ask him about what's going on there? It's like, oh, maybe that would be impolite. Maybe I should just let it go. And so as F's giving this speech, the vampire is like just staring at the wig, and all these thoughts are going through his head. So that's my reading of the scene.
That's phenomenal.
Also, we have a new member of the Wig Talk Army. Our great friend Mary on Twitter at BatMary, who was lured into watching this episode by our very own podcast, which you listened to last week.
Oh.
And so, first of all, on behalf of Blair, I would like to apologize. And second of all, she wanted me to note that she drinks vodka straight, which is something that you said no one ever does.
Oh.
So
I apologize at BatMary.
We have these are the members of the Wig Talk Army, straight vodka drinkers. Which honestly is exactly the kind of army I want to be commanding.
That's amazing. As a gin and bourbon girl, I do drink bourbon on it straight, but vodka makes me feel sick, and I've never seen anybody do it. But you know what? You go, BatMary.
I should note that you are a fleet admiral of the Wig Talk Army.
Oh, I like this.
Yes.
We should do like a Battlestar Galactica breakdown of what everybody does.
Yeah, well, I need to watch so I can learn some more titles because I am running out of titles to assign.
Well, if anybody else wants titles, they should tweet at us, and we would be happy to retweet.
If you tweet me about Wig Talk, I will induct you into the Wig Talk Army and give you a title. I'm very easy like that.
All right. Do you have any further notes on the episode?
No. It's not really. I mean, again, not like the worst episode, and not even really a bad episode.
Mm-hmm.
Just again, I think a lot of missed opportunities are happening here with how quickly they're going through this material on the fringes, this Gus material and stuff. Like, man, I would love to see an episode where it was just like Gus doing stuff and we really got to know what his situation is, because he's in kind of a weird situation, being a part of this vampire army, his own army. I like to think they're allies of the Wig Talk Army, but I just feel like we don't really know a whole lot about that right now.
Right.
And would kind of like to see things from his perspective for a good bit of time to kind of figure out what the deal is. But
I feel exactly the same way. I'm all about the Gus.
Yeah.
And I think that his story is very, very interesting. It has not detracted hugely from the books as of yet. The heist thing was completely made up, but
yeah, of course it was. That was one of those things that like clearly the TV show just invented.
Exactly.
But would have been great. Give me a heist episode.
I know.
Just throw me a freaking bone.
I know.
I talk about you for an hour every week. Like just give me, just buckle down and do a heist episode for me, please.
The one final note that I had that I think I a little bit casually mentioned earlier, and I've been tweeting about constantly all week, was having re-listened to the book again, just like to confirm everything and listen to the end. I'm deeply saddened to inform the audience that if they do follow the trajectory of the book, it will rely heavily on the performance of the actor playing Zach. And as of yet, that has been less than a one-note performance. And every time they show him, I'm really hoping he's going to do something else. But he's just knocking things over and erasing formulas and just being a little jerk. And, like, I understand he lost his mom. I get it. That's painful. In the book, he's like, he's not happy about it either. He's indignant in the books, too. But he's not like this. This is a choice. I don't know if they just can't get it out of this kid or if they are just directing him terribly. But if this is how the part of the book that I have been waiting for so long to happen is, like, if they're going to rely so heavily on this actor, I'm going to cry of sadness because it's going to be so, like, I'm just going to be weeping. I'm just going to be, like, forlorn. I can't go to work the next day. I'll be so sad because it's so good in the books. It's so good in the books, and this kid is so bad.
Oh,
it's
Blair.
so bad. There is a hashtag going out. It's hating on Zach and hashtag kill Zach, which were pretty popular tonight.
Right. Hashtag kill Zach is a little aggressive.
It's a little aggressive.
I want the character to die, but just the act of like using kill as a verb, like a little much for me. Hate on Zach is more my speed.
Yeah.
That news you just gave me, wow, really depressing. I feel lost. I only have 3 words for you. Pass the vodka.
Well, you should call Mary for that.
We're gonna set it up. The Wig Talk Army is gonna meet in a conference room, and it's BYOV. Bring your own vodka.
So that you guys can all reenact scenes as F, correct?
No, we're just gonna cry.
Oh, well, that's fine. All right. This wraps up our 18th episode of the Strain podcast. Before we go, I want to mention a few things. You can download and subscribe to our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. You can also hear all of our podcasts at our website, southgatemediagroup.com. Please subscribe to the show and also rate us. Follow the show on Twitter at @TheStrainPod, and Kyle and I at KyleLovesTV and @BlairLovesTV. Remember, both Kyle and Blair have an E at the end. Send us your fan mail at thestrainpodcast@gmail.com. The word "the" is in there, thestrainpodcast@gmail.com. And check out our website, tvbinges.com, to join in our monthly binges or create your own. We will be putting out our TV shows for you to vote on sometime later this week for our next binge. So check it out, go to the website, keep updated. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.